Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Marcus, for that warm introduction. I really, really appreciate it. And to your point, I might need your son for tech support. So let me get started here. Let's see now, share screen. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
We can.
Yes.
Oops. Okay, you can't see my screen.
Yep, you're good to go.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, and again, thank you so much to everyone that's made this possible. I too started off my career in project management, program management, and I see some familiar faces on the call. So it's so great to be with family, friends here in our PMI Silver Spring chapter. So welcome, welcome. We have a lot to cover this morning, so let me get right to it. What I want to talk about today is one, leading during this time of a lot of change and leading with resiliency. Two, I want to cover some of the challenges that we as project managers are seeing from our customers and how these challenges can convert to opportunities. And then three, I want to get into some innovative and emerging technologies that we're seeing come down the pike. And lastly, leave you with some strategic tips on how to go forward. So sounds like a plan? Great. So let me first start with the idea around finite versus infinite mindset. And this is something that I heard from someone who's always talking about leadership, Simon Sinek. And it really kind of put me into my own mindset on this subject. So when we talk about finite mindset, that is a mindset that definitely is bound by a beginning, a middle, and an end. Rules of the game are set, objectives are acknowledged at the beginning and agreed upon, and that's generally what you would call a finite mindset. When you talk about infinite mindset and infinite games, a lot of what we're suggesting here are knowns and unknowns. Rules fluctuate and change. Players may come and go. Objectives might start off as one thing and change into another. How many times that many of you have been as project managers, program managers on a project where you thought you knew the requirements, you thought you knew all of the stakeholders, all the players, and then they change over time. Sometimes they change really early on in the project, sometimes they change a lot later on in the project. And so I would submit to you that we as leaders can't afford to be playing with a finite mindset when in reality, the game is infinite, as we are seeing demonstrating today, and as we are seeing with our own flexibilities in continuing to do the work that we do in support of our federal leaders and our federal executives. And so this is something that we need to think about. How many of you, when you go back to when you took the PMBOK and you got encouragement from folks who had passed, you took your PMP, you studied the PMBOK, and you got encouragement from people who said, okay, now when you take the test, make sure that you apply what you learned in the text, in the book. Do not apply reality. Many of you had been operating as project managers before you even got into perhaps even sitting for your PMP. And when you did, you applied those rules because you passed. And as you study and apply and acquire PDUs, you also know the reality of the game. You know the reality of what we call this infinite game. I hearken back to, and I'm going to tell a quick story, as I often do, going back to my first day at the White House. This is back in 2009, right after the 4th of July. I came in and I was onboarded, I was sworn in, I was in awe of actually being in the White House on that particular day. And I first started off as deputy CIO before I stepped into the CIO role. And I was brought over to my organization who was having a morning stand-up, the CIO with all of his associate CIOs. And that morning, in ran the CISO who said that we had sustained a cyber breach on whitehouse.gov, which was the platform in which we engaged with our constituents who wanted to keep abreast of everything that was going on in the White House. And immediately the CIO looked to me and said, Karen, you've got to run with this thing. You've got to talk with the CISO. You've got to find out what's going on. And I ran down with him to the SOC to get more information, to get more data. Long story short, I started my morning at 8 a.m. and I, through the work of talking with the CISO, understanding what was happening, conversing with our CFO and our other application employees about how we were going to take down the whitehouse.gov platform and investigate and then try to figure out how we're going to put it back up. Ultimately, I winded up that day in the White House with the CIO briefing the then Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, and who everyone feared. And ultimately, we were able to get through what was a very, very challenging day. That evening when I walked out, it was about 9 p.m. I had never imagined that my first day would be as hectic, as crazy, and just anything that it winded up being. But again, it was one of those times where when I walked out, I remember saying to myself, I want to leave this place better than which I found it. And it was a simple mantra, and it was one that stayed with me through 2015, I'll actually say. And it's just acknowledging, I think, the application of flexibility and moving into and realizing that things are changing. And the one constant we have is change. So post-COVID, we've been operating for a good 7 to 8 months in this environment. And we've seen separation, confusion, concern, scared. We've also seen resilience. We've seen people step up to care for and to help and to move us forward. These are challenging times, but in the face of all of that, I like to say that yet we rise and still we thrive. And so talking about leading while in crisis, let me spend a little bit of time here. So we're all dealing with, not the least of which, a global pandemic, economic crisis, what we've seen take kind of a pivotal, sharp marker around social injustice, Black Lives Matter, and not the least of which, some of the concerns on climate change. And as leaders, as you lead your teams, it is very difficult to compartmentalize and say, wait a minute, I'm going to put this in hold and I'm going to put this in a box for a little bit while I'm able to deal with my team. Realize that that's not always possible. I don't know about many of you, but I will tell you, I will submit to you and open up that I generally try to start my day with meditation. Meditation, a bit of prayer, and just a quiet moment for myself before I even look at any devices, before I even turn on the news, before I look at all that's coming my way. And I think it has helped me in the last 7 to 8 months, because there are times when you do wake up and you say, I need a moment, I might not be able to do this today, and recognize it and realize it. Where we are still dealing with large volumes of work, and it isn't always sustainable. And one of the things that you as project managers and leaders need to do is check in. You check in with yourself, but you check in with your team members. And we're doing this with even more regularity and consistency. The thing that surprised me, even as we moved on to all of these different platforms, be it Microsoft Teams and WebEx and Zoom, is that, and this was really counterintuitive to me, is that I learned more about members of my team in the last 7 to 8 months that I had known even prior. I know who has the little ones, be it children at home who are learning in somewhat of a hybrid environment, to those who have their little fur babies, to those who have, may have work being done in their homes. It's a very interesting dynamic, and one, as I said, I would have never ever imagined at the start of this. So check in with your folks, and don't expect that people can work at maximum capacity. As I say, tag people out, hand the baton off to the next person. And you do need to at times switch out team members when they submit to you that they can't bring their whole self to the workforce or to support their clients and customers. We are in a time when we are seeing such diversity across the marketplace, amongst our customers and our peers and colleagues, and throughout our partners. If you're not aware, know this: we are operating at one time with at least 5 generations, and I said that right, 5 generations in the workforce. So you have the dynamic of having what may be a senior manager on your team, someone who has been used to an office, a desk, maybe even desk and chairs in their office, and going to a physical place to work, versus what may be an early career professional who has been used to going to a WeWork or a Starbucks and opening up their laptop and acknowledging, I am at work. So that's very different, and there's a gap in just how they have considered their workplace. And so recognize that with the people who you serve and people who are on your teams. We have more and more women who are matriculating and graduating with their bachelor's and master's degrees, and 51% at least of women in the workforce today. And as I said, a significant growth in our millennials. So there is the need for us to think about how we work with equity and inclusion and accessibility in all of the tools that we use, and how we hear from our team members, be it on Zoom calls and on some of your team membership calls. And so I would submit to you what I hear as I talk about leadership and I talk about the competencies that we need to bring forward as leaders. The things that I hear and entrust in is that be your authentic self. Be open, be transparent. You can be vulnerable and empower your team to take on tasks when you may not be able to, or when they are the best suited to take on that responsibility. Be inspirational, and last but not least, be fun at the same time. These are things that are rising to the top as competencies that we see that we need in leaders. So let's talk about the state of play. Post-pandemic, where did we find ourselves with the federal government? Where did we find our federal leaders? Time after time, I know you heard about this. As we needed to move to 100% remote, there was mass initial kind of consternation about whether or not the infrastructure was going to be able to support that, whether or not we had the VPN tools to do, let's say, 2-factor authentication and actually be able to have workers do what they do from home and be able to support. We saw and heard about the disparate data systems, of course, that we have. As at that time, OMB CIO Suzette Kent was trying to pull information and pull data from across, not the least of which HHS and others, but HHS, VA, and so on. There were challenges, and in some cases still are, with some of these disparate data systems, and which led to what we've heard, lack of transient across our healthcare information. And then how many of us struggle with our own supply chain issues as we were trying to get tissue and hand sanitizer, and that was just highlighted across our ecosystem. Supply chain challenges along with cyber resiliency. So that was the state of play. Now, what I want to get into is some of what I will present on the left side as some of the challenges and translating some of those things to opportunities. Federal leaders, as you all know, we've gotten through CR and we're into the next fiscal year, but we are seeing and still and have been seeing budget pressures as a reality. I know as a former federal executive, many times I had to look at balancing infrastructure with innovation. And generally speaking, operations always took the priority. You couldn't have a conversation with your stakeholders if they weren't getting, if the lights weren't turning on as they expected, if as a baseline, they weren't meeting the operational needs. Leaders are also challenged with making sure that their partners and their contractors are delivering. Are they getting the needs met of their requirements? Are there infrastructure challenges? Some went to testing the infrastructure one week to, again, having this remote work the next week. And in some cases, in news outlets, you heard about different agencies struggling with that. And then there's the idea of control. How much are our IT federal CIOs having to control within their own destiny? And how can they balance their constituent support? There are many people who need to go to, as an example, SBA. Many of the small businesses who are acquiring and inquiring on grants and loans needed to be able to get through those portals, needed to be able to get to the IRS, as an example, and in many cases, they were falling short. So there's some challenges there, and not the least of which, how are they managing their workforce who are not at arm's length distance away that they could reach out? Some of these challenges, again, we need to flip them on its head and look at opportunities and look at ways in which we can help federal leaders and how they're looking at contracts, identifying best value. In many cases, we see that these are the way contracts are coming out, best value pricing. How are they working with establishing collaborative environments with their team members, with federal employees, and with all of you? And then how are we establishing these virtual meetings? Are we present? Are our federal leaders present and able to engage with us in terms of what their need and what they want? And how are we trying to move at speed with policies? I used to believe that if we could do things at White House and we could do it with speed and agility, that could be done anywhere. How are we embedding Agile into our practices and our policies? And that's something that needs to continue. Getting back to the user and the constituent services. So again, top of mind for our federal leaders. What we don't want is, we don't want to erode the trust in the American public. We want to be, federal leaders want to be accountable. And those are some challenges there. They don't want to be viewed as low on the maturity spectrum, and put in a quick fix and believe that they're doing the right thing, but that fix has not a significant impact. What we're seeing and how we can change that into opportunities is looking at UI, UX, and CX. Some of these citizen-based designs that need to be at the forefront of applications and tools that are rolled out, so that if I'm going to a HUD portal as an example, and I'm going and I'm looking for a grant, that I'm a couple clicks away. I'm not getting embedded in, I can't find the information. I can't access the data. How are our federal leaders looking at moving out rapid policy delivery on tools and enshrined in Agile? So it isn't just about talking about it and moving out, it's about putting it in place, it's about practicing it and putting in achievable outcomes. These again are ways in which we can see some changes come about in constituent services. And last but not least, the workforce. This is always top of mind for me because, again, I was always and still try to pay attention to my team members and the needs of the team, because going back to what I initially said, if you cannot bring your whole self and take care of yourself, you can't serve others. So some of the challenges to the left that federal executives see, and I see too with the workforce, are technology infrastructure problems. We all raise our hands to having those moments where we do have those challenges. Ability, portability, separation of the workforce itself, not having the one place, not having that water cooler conversation when you can just quickly take care of some issues, but rather than setting up a Zoom call or flooding our email systems. Potential cyber breaches. We are all working at home. We are not in our offices. In many cases, we are still in phase 1 of this. Some have moved out to phase 2, but making sure that those infrastructures are in place so that we don't have that, we don't have a potential breach. And just managing the performance of the work. There are some who think that they have to be in close proximity to see that that work is actually getting done. And that's a falsehood. So what do we do and what do we need to do to change and to turn these into opportunities? So enable that technology. Certainly enable people to do the work that they need with the tools, with the applications, with the systems that they need. We are seeing increased productivity. The work is getting done, and to meet the requirements, we're not traveling, so certainly air quality is improved. And a lot of the functions that may have previously been thought to be work that had to be on-site, on-prem is not, and it's actually being supported remotely. And acknowledging that we have this distributed workforce, that we have this flexibility in a workforce that is, quite honestly, all over the country. Automation, we're doing some routine automation and acknowledging that there are certain things that can just be done, whether it's interviewing, onboarding, that can be done and that can move managers into more strategic types of activities. Virtual learning, making sure that your workforce, that they have the tools in their toolkit and that they're sharpening the saw and they're doing this online and embracing that. So with remote work up, with automation like robotics process automation up, migration to the cloud, the need to support our citizens, and the need for agile, how do we as project managers, how do we react? How do we improvise? How do we adapt? So I'd submit that there are ways that we can enhance and work with accelerating the digital business. And I'd call out 4 different areas. One is helping our customers to win. The other is unleashing force multipliers. The third is eliminating what I call waste or drags. And the fourth is helping to rebuild and or redirect resources. So how do we help our customers win? Well, one thing is we need to be looking out front in what are the upcoming trends? What are the emerging technologies? How do they meet the needs of our customers? How are our customers enabled to focus on the client experience? In many cases, we put ourselves in that role, and we go and we strategize with our customers on focusing on this. And how are we building new capabilities in a digital revolution? That's how we help them win. Unleashing force multipliers. By that I mean, as we're seeing things like embedding in change. Change is constant. Change is the new norm. It's always been, but we've seen a very bright highlighter come onto change in the last 8 months. And so unleashing that and recognizing that. And then how do we eliminate waste? You know, I heard in Marcus' bio about Lean Six Sigma and banishing these steps and drags that aren't necessary. In many cases, I think a lot of that might have started off in some of the manufacturing industries, but in all honesty, in just about everything we do, if we were to take sticky notes and just put it on a wall and look at all of the steps in some what may sound like very bureaucratic processes, one could come in and actually say, this isn't needed. And so for Karen to have all that she needs to do her step in the process, she needs all of this in her inbox at one time versus going to John and Carrie and Mary to get what she needs. So reduce those unnecessary steps. This is a good time to review policies and processes and figure out how they align with impact, how they make a difference, and then rebuilding and redirecting those resources. So as I said before, it's always a challenge to manage the budget that's going to infrastructure and operations versus innovation versus any emerging technology. But again, to appropriately classify what are the investments that need to be made and to help in that dialogue to help to accelerate the enterprise. And so we're seeing digital work build at scale. Again, moving from changes that we have seen in the operating model. So the next couple of slides that I have, I've pulled information from Gartner as a resource because in many cases, I will use that information myself as we're looking to future emerging technologies. So in response to the pandemic, what are we seeing? We're seeing more and more focus on use of digital channels and outreach to our customers and our citizens. We're seeing a movement for faster rate of production, increase in customer engagement. And what I would submit to you is that this isn't going to change. This is going to be the way that we move forward. And these are all in the plans as you look at the percentages on what's on top and what's trailing. These numbers are going to continue to be on the rise in terms of a new operating model. So what do we think about when we think about winning? And Gartner did a technology strategy survey with respondents from national and even across the globe. people who are innovators in this space to look at what we believe to be and get their input on what is expected to be substantial versus moderate versus little to no impact. And and it's not a surprise what you're seeing, right? Artificial intelligence and machine learning stands out as a solid margin as the leading technology in terms of expected potential and future business impact across a wide range of respondents. Not a surprise there. 5G wireless, similarly, I would say that it will have a substantial impact. And a lot of that has to do with the need for more bandwidth. It has to do with better mobile connectivity, an ability to deliver value in most of our business situations. Quantum computing, we're seeing quantum computing on the rise. It is possible that it's somewhat of a risk, but quantum computing is something that's necessary when we look at the long life of encrypted data, and that it'll be able to attack current, encryption techniques and opportunities. Virtual assistants, again, not a surprise. That's high core because there are many technologies and applications across the industry. And as much as we still hear about cloud computing, edge computing actually is, we're seeing a pivotal change, a pivotal role that edge computing is going to play, particularly on the Internet of Things. Blockchain sort of surprised me a bit because in many cases, what I see is I see a lot of proof of concepts with blockchain. It's still high on the financial business sector use. And so that is something that I don't think I would have expected to see as much of a substantial impact there, but it is showing up. And embedded AI, that is, you're going to continue to see that and other technologies in this space. So capabilities and trends there. The other area is to look at expected products and services coming out and substantial impacts that we're going to see from these sensing and display technologies. Now, I don't think anyone is surprised to see VR and mixed reality at the top. Many organizations that generally have a need for innovation in this space will see the adoption of VR. We're also seeing face recognition pop up, and that is going to have a substantial impact. But I would also submit to you that we do need to think about that with regards to privacy concerns and even digital ethics that are popping up. There are good uses for this, but there are always going to be trade-offs, right? When you think about this. Brain-computer interfaces, another big area for the display technologies. And we're seeing some of this because I think there are some cases where there's some tools that are out there like Muse and Emotive that actually use this. And this may be a little bit overly optimistic, but these respondents, as they were thinking about innovation, were thinking about innovation in the next 3 to 5 years. So these are these electrode sensors that are used, and really more and more wearable devices that we're going to see. Along the lines of that, you see emotion detectors, you see the flexible displays, the 3D cameras, and other sensing technologies on the rise. And again, these percentages are showing where the substantial impact should fall on. Then, even as we look at these non-IT technologies, you're going to see things like video analytics using AI. Again, not a surprise. It's a clear leader with a wide range of potential, I would say, industry and also consumer applications. These biotechnologies are more in line and driven, I would say, with manufacturing procedures, a lot around healthcare. and 3D, 4D printing. Again, not a surprise. I mean, 3D has been in our space for quite a while. What's on the horizon for us is the 4D printing, and that's that inclusive of dimensional printing and adding simulations like heat, light, or chemicals to create that 4D. General purpose robots. We've seen that's not new, but again, have high impact. And this is around organizations that have a lot of physical goods and machinery types of things. And then knowledge graphs, they're suited for a lot of growth in what we see in unstructured, structured data that can take information and translate it into things like natural learning and natural language processing. And then, not a surprise, some of the autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles that we're seeing, the smart clothing that have the Bluetooth, the exoskeletons that, again, are useful when you need a physical limb that has the flexibility to enable movement. So these things are on the rise. Now, talking about rebuilding and redirecting budget resources, what I submit to you is that knowing what investments need to be made for your customers and clients can help to focus on impactful areas. No surprises that AI is top of the leaderboard here. We are going to continue to see AI and ML on the rise, and organizations that are using it, whether it's for natural language processors, whether it's for virtual assistants or chatbots. In many cases, when you go and update your insurer, as an example, you are engaging with a chatbot. You're not expecting necessarily a human to come on. You're putting in information and you're engaging and you're developing out what you need for health insurance. Cloud computing, it's been a thing for the better part of over 10 decades, but I would also submit that there's still work to do in the federal government around cloud. That has proven time and time again, particularly in these last 8 months, where it's been value added rather than infrastructure and large data centers. And then of course you see all the others from IoT on up to big data analytics. So the balance of and the shuffle of investments is something that we need to acknowledge and be aware of. You see what's decreasing, as I just mentioned, infrastructure and data center going down. But again, while that's going down, certainly means that the investment has to be in place for cloud services and solutions. And this has taken our federal government longer than industry to move out. But in some cases, as we've seen in the last decade, they've certainly been on the rise. We've seen improvements in our cloud service providers, what with the federal government requirements. And then other things like certainly big increase in cyber and in information security. That is always going to be top of mind. This is National Cyber Week, and we're hearing today, even as you open up and listen to the news, about challenges with as we prepare to do our civic duty and to vote, whether or not there are breaches, whether or not we have foreign engagement into our voting. So more and more ever present with the investments that need to be made in cyber, and certainly in business intelligence and data analytics that will help to support and really shorten the time to insight and the time for knowledge that's needed by our federal leaders. So what do we see for the future of delivering technology services to the government? How do we manage in this future? Well, I would say that the best thing that we can do as project managers, project leaders, is prioritize those services that have the biggest impact based on the strategies that they set forward, based on the direction that they're trying to go. How are we need to know that digital identity is crucial in this game and that we're in right now. How do we optimize plans and lay out and help them with optimizing cost options? And how can we be responsive? We need to look at using APIs, using automation. We need to look at, for instance, if we're helping, let's say, for instance, we're helping on a help desk support. The expectation of your federal clients is not that you're going to have the same size of people supporting, but that you're going to put some automation in place, that you may, over time, reduce your FTEs, but enable even greater services. How are we preparing to pivot from policies that we're seeing? I mentioned earlier about digital ethics and security. These policies, digital privacy, we need to be prepared and knowledgeable that we have to pivot when we have these policies. And how are we involving our customers as we help in identifying sourcing strategies? How can we support in that vein? We need to be considered partners and work side by side with them on these strategies, because that's when your customers realize that in the engagement, they have someone who's pretty much working with them on solutioning and engaging in where their strategic roadmaps align and how you can support with that. And so what I'd like to leave you with is a recommendation on strategies. And these strategies, they do need to be adaptive, because time and time again, we are living and breathing in a changing and evolving society. But with that comes the knowledge of flexibility and bringing in what we have in our toolkit to be most flexible, to be most adaptive, to engage and work side by side with our customers. So embrace and explore uncertainty. It's not it's easy to say, it isn't easy to do all the time, but by doing that, you're positioning yourself where it's okay to be a little bit off balance, but it's also okay to be looking to the future and enabling your customers and clients to see what's available to them. Be responsive to change. That's almost like PMP 101, in that it is going to be part of projects, it's going to be part of programs, and that's just something that we acknowledge at the onset. Include the smart team members that you have and your customers when you're talking about programmatics, when you're talking about technical roadmaps and strategies, so that you are working side by side with your clients, but you're also bringing and engaging the aptitude of your team members who have strong skills and abilities in this area. And then be knowledgeable about how we improve IT modernization. This is also a constant that we talk about. These efforts are needed, and what's the best tool, system, application? We are going to keep some legacy systems. We have to, in some cases, depending on whether you're talking about ship systems, weapon systems. If it exists, then they may need some of those legacy tools. But again, as we're designing and redesigning, we need to be aware of how we modernize and how we enable. And then bring agility into all of your execution. That is, that goes without being said. it isn't necessarily just a focus on software as a service, as we've talked about agile, but it is a way that you need to be thinking about how you are most flexible, how you are most pliable in the environments that you are in, and just being sure that you enable that as you execute along your projects and along your programs. And with that, I would love to hear your thoughts and questions and engage with this group.
Yeah, Karen, that was an outstanding presentation. And we really, truly got a lesson today about the infinite game and the infinite mindset that Simon Sinek talks about, and how you use that to manage in that environment in these unprecedented times. We really appreciated the conversation about bringing your whole self to work. And there was, in the chat, there was healthy conversation about balancing productivity and the efficiencies gained with being able to work remote with having fun at work, right? So I think, yeah, so I think the group would definitely like to keep the conversation going in the chat with you. If you're willing to stay on for a little while, there's a few folks that want to talk about productivity and having fun and how do you balance the both of those. And then you talked about unleashing force multipliers. And one of those force multipliers is embracing change. Outstanding, outstanding tie of those two concepts. And then in the later half of your presentation, you talked about innovation and products and innovation with respect to products and services. Folks really appreciated how you laid out that information. And there was even a comment in the chat that said, hey, you've given people future careers to look into, right, for the next 5 to 10 years. So we're hoping that your slides will be available so that we can continue the conversation and guide our careers based on some of the concepts that you shared. Silver
I will
Spring,
definitely make this I'll make this available to the team, because as you said, these are tools that we need in our toolkit. We continue to sharpen our saw. It is not anything that we don't know, but we need to at times remind ourselves over and over again as we evolve.
yeah. Karen, great presentation. Thank you for your time. And please, if you don't mind, the kudos are coming in the chat. If you don't mind, would you engage some of the folks in chat as we transition to the next presentation?
I will, most definitely.
Thank you so much. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Virtual clap.